can't remember exactly when this happened, but I think it was March 2019, when I was 17. I quite often get the train into London to visit my boyfriend. I go up on Friday or Saturday and come back Sunday evening. My parents always told me, quite rightly, to try and get an early train home on Sunday in order to avoid traveling late by myself, but me being naive and stupid always accidentally missing the earlier trains in order to spend more time with my boyfriend. This particular Sunday, I was getting a train that got into the station where I lived at around 9 p.m. My station is the last stop on the line and where the train terminates, so by the end of the journey it is always relatively empty. Sometimes, I'm the only one getting off, aside from the guard. Usually, I would just put my noise-canceling headphones on, settle down and zone out of whatever was happening around me. I'm quite an anxious traveler, so blocking out the sound helps me relax. I also try and sit at the end of the carriage where there aren't as many people, as having lots of people around can make me more susceptible to anxiety attacks. After this evening, I always made sure to sit near people. I'm sitting with my headphones on, tucked away with my suitcase in the footwell of the seat next to me, in a pair of seats next to a window sitting in the window seat, when I notice a man stumble into the seats adjacent to mine across the aisle. He leans across the seats, looks directly at me, and mumbles something to me. He was wearing all black, a massive black coat, and had a big duffel bag. A little anxious because I'm not the biggest of fan of talking to strangers, take off my headphones and politely ask him to repeat himself. His speech is slurred, making what he says completely incoherent, but after he repeats himself several times, I realize he's asking if I know if there are any taxi companies at my station. I say no, sorry, put my headphones back on. He leans over again and asks me the same question. I take my headphones off and give him the same reply. No, I don't know of any, sorry. He says something else. I ask him to repeat himself because his speech is so slurred I don't know what he is saying. The strange conversation goes on for about 20 minutes. I can't understand much of what he is saying. He's sort of half mumbling, half speaking, and he's not really making much sense. He keeps asking me how I'm getting home and where I live. I just say by car and don't say anything about where I live. I'm super nervous now because this guy just gave me the creeps. I had a feeling something bad was going to happen, and he's just starting to make me uncomfortable. There was just this vibe about him that he was bad news. He then asked me if I'm going to call the police on him. I say no, and he starts mumbling and swearing profusely. He mumbles something about beating my effing brains in. I'm really starting to freak out now. All of a sudden, he moves across the aisle to sit in the seat next to mine, trapping me in my seat. I cannot escape. I'm sitting next to the window and he's completely blocking the aisle. I'd have to awkwardly climb over him to leave. I've decided he must be high or drunk because his eyes look absolutely crazy and his speech is so slurred. He tells me I'm very beautiful and asks if I have a boyfriend, moving closer until I could feel his breath on my face. I look around to see if there is anyone in the carriage with me, but I can't see anyone. He leans in really close and I'm freaking out now. But luckily the train guard comes through from the next carriage, sees me looking very scared and comes over to ask if everything is okay. Immediately this guy's demeanor changes. He leans away from me and he waves his hand as if to say nothing is wrong. I say yes, everything is okay. But by the look on my face, the guard can tell I'm super uncomfortable. The guard makes small talk with the guy and then moves to stand by the doors behind us. I don't know what to do. Even though the guard is behind me, I still feel really unsafe and know I have to get away from this man. I ask the guy if he would move back to his seat and say I don't want to talk to him, as he's making me uncomfortable. He moves back and starts muttering and swearing again, mumbling half-formed threats under his breath. I call my dad who's picking me up, and when he answers the phone I immediately say, "Hey Dad." The guy looks at me and says, I'm sorry, I didn't know you had a dad." He tries to talk to me while I'm on the phone. He's talking over me the whole time, but I can't actually make out what he's saying. I have no idea how to try and communicate to my dad that I'm not feeling safe and this weirdo is talking to me without him overhearing. The train is pulling into the final stop. So I pulled my suitcase out of the footwell to try and make a quick exit from the train. The guy gets up really quickly and goes in front of me, then grabs my suitcase to take it off the train and steal it, presumably. I still had my hand on it and managed to pull it out of his hands. He gets off the train quickly and I stand next to the guard for a couple of minutes because I didn't want to get off the train at the same time as this guy. The guard asked me if I'm okay and I burst into tears. I'm already anxious and tired, and this may seem like something insignificant, but I suffer with really bad anxiety and it really creeped me out. A lady comes over. I don't know how she knew I was crying about what had just happened with this guy. She must have seen him getting off the train. She says he was asking her about taxis and making her feel uncomfortable until she told him to talk to someone else. She apologizes for sending him my way. They both offer to walk me to my car. Luckily, my dad is sitting in the parking lot and I get in the car safe and sound. There's no sign of where the guy on the train went. I wish the story stopped here, however. We make a stop at a small supermarket on the way home, and usually my dad would send me in to get whatever we needed, but because I'm still upset from the train, I sit in the car in the deserted parking lot. As soon as my dad enters the supermarket, a car pulls up on the other side of the lot. I see the same guy from the train in the passenger seat, and my blood runs cold. The car he's in isn't a taxi either, which I found strange as that's what he was originally asking me about. I sink down in the seat a bit, hoping he doesn't see me, but it's like he already knows I'm in the car. He starts pointing at me and talking to the driver. They get out of the car and start walking through the lot towards my car. I immediately lock the doors. My phone is in my bag, which is in the boot, so all I can do is sit there and pray my dad is going to come back at any moment. They've nearly made it to the car when my dad gets back. He was only going in for bread. They see him and start walking immediately in the other direction towards the supermarket. I yell at my dad to get in the car. I'm crying so hard, and by the time my dad has gotten to the driver's seat, the men are nowhere to be seen. I managed to calm down enough to tell my dad between sobs about how the guy from the train was in the parking lot in a car with someone and that they were walking towards me. I point at the car they were in and my dad doesn't say much and just starts driving home. When we get home and my mom has managed to calm me down a bit, my dad tells me how he noticed the same car driving behind us when we left the station, meaning they must have followed us from the station to the supermarket. I felt really embarrassed, like I was overreacting and making a fuss over nothing because I'm just oversensitive with bad anxiety. When the guy starts talking to me on the train, I felt physically sick and just had this overwhelming feeling something bad was going to happen. Even though I have anxiety, I usually don't get these feelings just from talking to a stranger. So creepy guy who harassed me on the train and then followed in my car. I don't know what your intentions were, but let's not meet again. This happened yesterday after I finished the night shift at around 3 a.m. I work at a store of a big fast food chain to pay for my university. Our staff changes frequently because of a lot of students and migrants working at our place, so you don't get to know each other very well. Everybody has their own social life, and it is very, very rare for coworkers to establish friendships outside of working hours. Still, you know the people on your shift, and the night shift has particularly few workers. One of my coworkers, Jasir, started to get interested in me. Not that I noticed. I'm young and dumb, like being friendly and important for later, have a hard time saying no. In December 2019, our store threw a Christmas party at a pub. I went and had a great time, but I also made plans for later that night. Because of that, I wanted to leave early, which made Jasir also want to leave early, despite the fact he neither needed nor planned it beforehand, which made me uncomfortable. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to get to the train station and I did, so I couldn't say no and just let him tag along. When we arrived at the train station, it came to light that there was no train he could take to get home. None. He did not check beforehand, he did not ask me, he just wanted to tag along. With me. Super uncomfortable. Instead of taking the train to the main station, he got into my train and only got out when I insisted he change his trains at another big station. But oh boy. That was not the train of the title. In January 2020, Jasir asked me out for coffee and I agreed. I thought, he just wants friends. He doesn't have any and can only rely on his coworkers. If something happens, I can just nope out. And so I went. First, it was okay-ish. We mostly talked about work-related stuff because we don't share any hobbies. We are not the same age and we don't have the same mother tongue. Jasir didn't like talking about work. He started talking about how different I was from other coworkers, how nice of a person I am, and how good my charisma is. Then he asked if we could get to know each other better. I genuinely didn't want to and still don't. Jasir is not my type, neither as a person nor from his looks, especially his looks, even if I sound superficial. While I'm in my early 20s, Jasir is at least in his early 30s. I've no problem with age gaps, story for another subreddit, but I'm not attracted to men that dress like teenagers. Instead of telling Jasir a straight no, I told him I was not interested in having a boyfriend. He didn't take that seriously and told me I would change my mind. I told him I wouldn't. He again was not really on board with that opinion, so I elaborated my opinion 3 times in German and 1 time in English to get it very clear. He always changes to English if he does not get something or thinks he misunderstood, even if he heard it clearly and just does not like it. I mean, obviously my opinion is going to change if I explain it in English rather than German, right? We left the conversation with him still not convinced and me being really not interested in a second meeting. He quit soon after and I foolishly assumed I was free. But whenever he came to my workplace to place an order, he would ask me out to eat something. And every time I would postpone whatever I said the last time, because of finals, because of travel, because of anything I could get my hands on. Then came COVID-19 that hit Germany in March, and I didn't see him anymore. I blocked him on social media in April and hoped that was the last thing to happen. But oh boy, that was not the case. Today I finished my shift at 3 a.m. and left with my female and very Asian coworker Wei to catch the next train. We take different trains, so we decided to wait in the main lobby until I need to go to my platform. And that time Jasir appeared. He just finished his shift and was on his way home. Wei asked him which train he needed to get and he said he was walking home. While the conversation went on, I got closer to Wei to get some space between me and Jasir. Wei did not grasp how uncomfortable I was in this situation and she just walked away. What did Jasir do? He placed himself between me and Wei, right in my vision line. Every fiber in my body felt how he barged into my personal space. I decided I could not take a private conversation with him and said, "Oh, look, I need to get to my platform," just to end it, but Jasir followed me. Through the main lobby, through the train station, into the elevator, and into the train. I was internally screaming and walked through the train until I saw another passenger. I sat down in the row of seats next to me and Jasir followed. As if every bit of luck had just left me, the other passenger moved seats and went away, so I was back alone. Jasir talked and I showed clear signs of not wanting to continue the conversation. I hoped he would leave before the train departed, but he didn't. Mind you, the train goes in the opposite direction of his house, and is 1 hour walking distance from my workplace. There is no way in hell this man could get anything out of taking that train except following me and continuing the conversation. I was freaked out and told him in English he was acting very weird. Maybe I should have used a different word, but English is not my first language, and at that point I only thought about escaping. I could not let him see my station or how he could easily find my home. I don't live rural, but at 3 a.m. there's nobody on the streets, so him following me home was terrifying. I thought about getting off a station earlier, but then I would need to get a cab, for which I did not have cash on me, or I needed to walk the rest and he could still follow. I decided to get up at the next station, let him get out of the train first, and then just stay inside while the doors closed. It unfortunately worked, but only after telling him clear this was not my station. I would not get out and he would not get back in. I even held my hand out to stop him from coming back. He stayed outside after the conductor shouted at us to let the door close. So, let's rewind. He's way older than me, but does not get the concept of me not wanting to be in a relationship with him. Whenever he does not like an answer, he switches to English because it just might be a misunderstanding. He followed me 2 times into my train and almost home, without even thinking about how creepy that behavior is. So, Jasir, let's not meet again. This happened about a year ago, when I was visiting my family back home in the city from college during winter break. My old high school friends decided to all get together at the bowling alley to catch up, but because I was the only one without a car, my best friend offered to pick me up from the nearest rail train station. That station also happens to double as a bus transfer station, so a variety of people, homeless, drunk, sober, etc., pass through. I had just gotten off the train and it wasn't too dark out yet, maybe 6ish, and I called my friend and told him to pick me up by the pickup or drop-off area, which was just between the transportation hub and the parking structure, and he told me it was going to be a 20-minute wait, so I stood waiting on the sidewalk. For some reason, there wasn't a lot of traffic coming into the pickup or drop-off area, but there were 2 cars in the area, most likely waiting to pick up a relative or friend, just sitting in their cars on their phones. After a few minutes pass, I see 2 European men, late 20s maybe, stumbling around drunk towards the area. I didn't really think anything of it, because I reasoned they were most likely headed towards their car in the parking structure, but they kept getting closer to me. One of the guys started to catcall me in slurred words saying baby and beautiful. Another sober one was sneering at me. Eventually, I realized they were not just catcalling me from afar, but walking to me. And after they got within 3 feet of me, I sped walk a few paces to the side. At this moment, the more drunk guy starts cussing at me, saying I'm a effing B-word and laughing, but I just brush off the encounter when they stumble away. About 10 minutes pass and it has started to get dark, and one of the 2 cars that was waiting had driven away. So now there is only 1 car with an Asian guy waiting in the pickup drop-off area with me. Nobody else was around. Then I hear a car screech and rapidly pull up to the pickup drop-off area, and the other car and I get startled, and we just see this banged up car roll the windows down. That's when I see that it was the same 2 guys before, and I realize they are purposely harassing me because the parking lot does not require them to go through the pickup drop-off area. The car then pulls right up to where I'm standing, and I see the car door open. The one that was more drunk jumps out at me with both his hands to grab, but I kind of dodge and he just narrowly misses me. At this point, I ran the 40 or so feet to where the Asian guy's car was, and I'm sort of screaming because I'm genuinely afraid I'm going to get kidnapped. I guess the Asian guy had watched the whole thing because he looked just as freaked out as I was. I stood by his car, and as the drunk guy stumbled on the sidewalk and looked at us, the Asian guy turned on the headlights and then turned on his high beams. The drunk guy stares at us for a minute, disorientated by the lights, mumbling in some European language, probably more cuss words, maybe like Turkish or Russian, and then eventually gets back in the car and drives away. I stayed by the Asian guy's car until my friend pulls up, and I get into my friend's car and start crying. I tell my mom later I think I almost got kidnapped, but she tells me they were probably just drunk jerks trying to scare a little girl. But I don't think so. I think they were up to something sinister. Either way, creepy drunk European guys, let's not meet again. This probably isn't as bad as some of the stories on this thread, but I feel I need to put it to somewhere because I'm not sure if I can say it anywhere else. Every time I go to tell a friend about it, I quickly back out of it, not wanting them to worry about me. So hey Reddit, I'm a 16-year-old girl who apparently has no common senses and is probably going to get herself lost or killed. In my 16 years on this earth, I've barely left my hometown. My family don't really do holidays, and I've only ever left the UK once, and that was for a school trip to France. But you see, this has left me with a yearning for adventure that has never been quenched. So around the time of my 15th birthday, I decided that I was going to start traveling on my own, without the knowledge of my parents, by train. Up until the other day, I had only gone to towns and places less than an hour away from my own. But you see, last Saturday was the big one. I've been planning it for weeks. I was going to wake up early and catch a train to a place 4 hours away. And that's what I did. I told my parents the perfect alibi, and they wouldn't expect me back until late. I caught a 5:20 train that morning, and I went on a nice big adventure. It was amazing. I loved it. And then it was time to go home. I arrived back at the station and waited for my train. In the corner of my eye, I noticed a man looking at me. I felt uneasy. I quickly pushed this feeling to the side, worrying that I was just being judgmental. After all, he had that kind of look about him. My train pulled up, and I jumped on, ready for the first hour and first train of my 4-hour journey back. Initially, I sat down in a single seat with no window near it. I had a quick debate in my head over if it was worth moving, and finally deciding it was, I got up and went to the next carriage to sit down in a 2x1 seat just behind a 2x2, the ones with the tables, which had a young couple and their 4-year-old in. On the other side of the walkway was another 2x1 and 2x2 seat, all of which had people sitting in them. By the time I had actually got up, everyone else was seated and the train was about to depart. So when someone then walked through the doors I had just come through, I found it strange, but not enough to bother to turn around and see who it was. Whoever this mystery person was, they just carried on up, further up the carriage after realizing there was no space here. 2 stops pass and nothing really happens. The 4-year-old in front stated she was thirsty, and the parents realized they had no water left. I was going to offer her some of mine, but I felt that it would just look like I had been listening in on their conversation the whole time. When the train pulls into the next station, the people to the side of me all get off the train, leaving those seats empty. The 2x1 seats are quickly taken up by a man who has clearly just got on the train. Once the doors close, the 2x2 is then taken up by one guy on his own, who looks very familiar. The guy from the station? No, it can't be. I'm just being paranoid. But he keeps staring at me. He keeps looking at me, and it's making me all kinds of uncomfortable. I try meeting his gaze, hoping that they'll get him to stop, but it didn't work. He still kept looking at me. Then I noticed that when he's not looking at me, he's watching the little girl. The parents don't seem to notice. I decide that I'm safe because there's a couple in front, because that makes sense, right? The little girl says she's thirsty again, and so the dad gets up to go see if he can find some water on the train. When he returns, he mutters something about the only thing he can think of is getting water from the bathroom taps, but that's not a good idea, and he really doesn't want to do that. At this point, I decide that I should probably just give them mine. After all, I can probably last longer than a 4-year-old without water. So I offer the dad my water, and he gladly accepts it, asking me if I'm sure, before pouring some of mine into his daughter's cup. I say it's fine, as I get the good, happy feeling in my stomach over helping someone else. However, this feeling is quickly replaced with dread as I see the strange man opposite me, sticking his thumbs up as if to say, "Well done" to me. It was such a small gesture that freaked me out so much. My brain started working overtime with its paranoia. I'm 3.5 hours away from home, on my own, and my parents don't even know I'm here. How stupid could I be? If I get back, I'm never leaving the house again. Did I not listen to all these horror stories from the media? Did I not realize what happens to girls out on their own? I had to get myself to snap out of it. I had to make a plan. Getting worked up and paranoid wasn't going to help anyone. I had to make a plan. The way I saw it, I had 2 options. 1, get off at the next station and hope to God he doesn't follow me. At this point, I was convinced that the person who walked past me earlier was this man, and that he had followed me into his carriage and moved down when he saw the seats were free, and wait an hour for the next train that would take me home. Or 2, move carriages again and try to find the staff. I could just sit near them, and if he follows me, then let them know about the situation so they could help me. I decided 2 was my best option, but I'd wait until the train arrived at the next station and head back through the doors to the carriage I was originally on, in hopes that it looked like I was getting off. The time it took for the train to get to the next station, honestly, it felt like it lasted a whole lifetime, and the man kept looking at me. When the train finally did stop, I moved quicker than I'd ever had in my whole life as I got through the doors and sat as far away from them as I could. But it turned out that my originally carriage was actually the last one, at the back of the train where the staff were not. If If I wanted to get to the staff, I would have to walk past the man again. I definitely did not want to do that. So I just sat and waited for my stop, thankful that this carriage was a lot louder and busier. The noise was comforting, so I played my music on full blast, making sure that it couldn't be heard outside my headphones because I'm not a monster, and just let myself cry a little. Every train I got after that, I made sure to sit right by the staff, but I didn't feel anywhere near safe until I finally got home to my dad's arms. I never knew a hug could make me feel so safe. So creepy man on the train, in the tradition of this sub, let's not meet again.